All right, continuing our conversation about children's stories and reclaiming them for Jesus, making them again about the truth about who Christ is and what Christ has done. Today we want to talk about David and Goliath. Now, that is probably every little boy's favorite story. And I'm not going to say it's not some little girl's favorite story too, but I loved the story of David and Goliath when I was growing up. Such a cool story. And the gist of it, right? The children's version of it is we get told, well, David was a shepherd boy. And I loved this part because he would, when the bear or the lion would come against the sheep, he says that he would get strength and God would give him strength over the bear and the lion. And he was like, this Philistine, this giant will be just like that bear or the lion. And you're like, yeah, David. And then David goes and he gets 5 stones. He tries Saul's armor on first. It's too big for him. It doesn't work. And so he goes and gets 5 stones, puts them in his bag. And then Goliath insults David, and David says some stuff back to Goliath and says, today I'm going to give you your corpses to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And then David slings the stone into Goliath's head, goes over, takes Goliath's own sword, cuts off his head, and you're just like, man, that is insane. Now, I honestly don't remember ever being taught the part about David cutting off Goliath's head when I was a kid. Maybe they left that part out. That's a little too much for the kid's story. So the rock goes into his head and kills him. We were okay with that part, apparently, but not the finishing of the story. So again, this story is one of those that kind of gets dealt with from the perspective of it's a kid's story. And it gives us boldness and confidence. And now you do have adults who like this story because they'll say something like, just like David beat his giant, whatever giant you're facing today, God's going to help you beat that giant too. And so that's how we tend to approach it as adults. It's like, hey, you can face your giants today. Go out there and slay your giants today. Whatever giant you have, like, God will give you victory over it just like he did David. That's not what's going on here, all right? So this is King Saul. Couple of things, like there are about 3 different things at play here. King Saul is the first king over the unified nation of Israel. And it is because the people have rejected God as their king. We're in 1 Samuel 17, David and Goliath. But if you go back to 1 Samuel 8, you'll see that the people have already said, we want a king. We want to be like all the other nations of the earth. Give us a king. And they're demanding that of Samuel the prophet. And God tells them, yeah, do what they've asked. He goes, because they haven't rejected you, Samuel, as the prophet. They've rejected God saying this. They've rejected me as being king. So God gives them King Saul. And Saul is first king over all of Israel, and he's taller than everybody else. He looks kingly. They're excited to have Saul as king. But Saul in chapter 15 of 1 Samuel has rejected God and disobeyed God. So God has told Samuel, I am going to anoint a new king, a king after my own heart. And in 1 Samuel 16, Samuel anoints David. David's going to be the new king. And there needs to be this kind of change of power, this change of balance. So Saul is of the tribe of Benjamin. David is of the tribe of Judah. He is the forerunner for Christ. David's the picture of Christ. And so there needs to be some sort of introduction. David's just a shepherd boy. Samuel's anointed him as king, but no one else knows that who this guy is. He's just a shepherd boy. And so he's been playing the harp for King Saul every now and then when a demon, harmful spirit comes on Saul. But Saul doesn't even remember who David is. That's how unimportant David is at this moment, right? No one knows who he is. No one understands who he is. And so the first thing that's happening in this story is God has picked David to be the king over all of the nation of Israel. God has picked David as a forerunner for Christ, as an example of Christ. David's going to be the first king who will ever reign from Jerusalem. He'll call the city Zion. There's all these images that point us to Jesus, because even in the book of Ezekiel, 450, 500 years after King David, Ezekiel talks about the temple being rebuilt and talks about how God will reinstitute David on the throne, but it's not David the king. It's a reference to Christ. And so all of this is pointing to Jesus. We have to remember that. And maybe the reason that we treat these things as Bible stories is because our Sunday school teachers, when we were kids, just didn't know the scripture very well. But we have definitely got to raise the bar for our teachers. So this is part of the reason that David's going to go face off against Goliath. Remember, they've been facing off against Goliath for 40 days. For 40 days, 39 days in a row, people have been coming out and standing in battle lines, and Goliath would come out and he would say, hey, send one of your strongest soldiers over to fight me, and we'll just have one guy fight one guy instead of there be mass casualties. And if I win, you guys become our slaves. And if you win, we'll become your slaves. And for 39, 40 days, no one has done it. And then David shows up in the camp. He's bringing some bread and some cheese to his brothers to see how they're doing at battle. And Goliath comes out and David goes, oh, heck no. And he goes, I got this. I'll go take care of this guy. And he decides to go face Goliath. Now, that's one of the things, right? That God is about to put David in the spotlight. And I'll wrap that up in just a second. But the other thing that's in place here is that God says, or David says, what is this uncircumcised Philistine? What's this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He's coming against God. Now, circumcision, if you go back to Genesis 21, circumcision was a sign that the Israelite people were the covenant people of God, that they were in relationship with God. And so David isn't saying, well, he's uncircumcised, he lacks a medical procedure. David is saying that this Philistine is uncircumcised, therefore he is not one of the covenant people of God, and we are the covenant people of God. And so we can trust God to do this thing. And so David is going against the Philistine, saying, this guy doesn't belong to God. This guy isn't part of God's people. This guy isn't in covenant relationship with God. And then God is using David to begin to establish David as king. Now, the third thing that we need to remember is this isn't David's giant. So when adults read this story and they go, oh yeah, whatever giant you're facing, don't forget you can come against your giant too. Goliath is not David's giant. Goliath, the Philistines, historically throughout the whole Bible, are enemies of the people of God. And they come against the people of God over and over and over again. They are a repetitive bad guy that we see throughout the whole Bible. And so this is an enemy of God, not an enemy of David. And so those three things are really important. God's putting David into the spotlight, that the Philistine is uncircumcised, and then also this is not the enemy of David, it's the enemy of God. And so really quickly, let me wrap this up. David goes out, he kills the giant, and they get victory over the Philistines. And then as they're returning home, now remember, David has, as far as we know, killed one person. They chased the Philistines off, so he may have killed others, but what's recorded for us is that he kills this giant. And as the people, David included, as the people are marching back to Jerusalem, having come back from this battle that they're victorious in, the women are coming out of their houses and they're saying, Saul has slain his 1,000, but David has slain 10,000. So David has killed one person and they're attributing 10,000 to him. And then Saul says, all the people's hearts are going after him. What else can he have but the kingdom? And so this is where the hearts of the people begin to change. David was an unknown. He kills Goliath, and now he's a known. And not only is he a known, but the people love him, and they're beginning to go after him because God is about to establish him as the king. And God has once again overthrown his enemies. And so that's the story of David. There's so much more going on to it than just a little kid used to guard the sheep and fight off bears and lions, and now he can take a giant too, and we can be brave like David. And so remember that there's more to it than that. And when you have the opportunity to teach yourself this text all over again, or teach it to your kids or grandkids, fill it with the truth of how it's pointing to Christ. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week for another children's story that's not really a children's story.